Well, welcome everyone to the February 2020 meeting of the Mississippi PowerShell User Group. Tonight we have Anthony Howell with us, and he'll be presenting using modules to build modules. Take it away, Anthony.
Cool, thank you, David. Though it may be, as we just learned, this morning or this afternoon, depending on where you are. So using modules to build modules, that's what we're going to talk about tonight. I am the Posh Wolf. Let me put my mouse in the right place so that the slide progresses. There we go. So just really quick introduction to who I am to anyone watching that does not know. So I am the Posh Wolf. It's my secret identity online. If I meet you in person, I'll tell you that I'm Anthony Howell, not the Posh Wolf. Unless we're at the PowerShell Summit, and then I might say the Posh Wolf. But I'm from Eugene, and this joke probably isn't going to make a lot of sense to the international folk, but Eugene, Oregon is pretty infamous for being full of hippies. So people that like to bike, eat granola, and grow out their beards. I fit in kind of. I don't have a beard. I don't know if the video is going to show up in the recording or not. But I like being married more than I like having a beard, so I don't have a beard. Okay, I blog, I tweet sometimes. I've authored one Pluralsight course, and if you haven't heard of TechSnips, it's a great place to find some really nice short how-to videos. And I also do this professionally, so if you guys ever need someone to do PowerShell on the side, I do it professionally, but if you need someone on the side, then yeah, give me a shout. Okay, so enough about me. Let's talk about actually what I'm going to cover tonight, because I'm kind of doing not a deep dive, but more of an overview of several topics here related to modules. So specifically, one of the things that I always struggle with getting into building modules is the fact that there are modules to help you. And I saw a lot of presentations on like just Plaster or just PlattyPS or just InvokeBuild. Never seen one on PS Deploy, or even ones on like Pester. Like there are tons of stuff on Pester, but never really someone who walked through and showed how all of them worked together. And so that's I'm sure someone has. I just haven't seen it. And so I just wanted to do a presentation that talks about how all of these modules work together. So yeah, let's get started. Oh, my demo environment. So I'm running Windows 10 here. I got PowerShell 6.2.4. Though I believe everything I do will work in 5.1. The 98% of what I do these days is in PowerShell Core, so I haven't actually tested this in 5.1. But I'm also using VS Code, the latest version. I literally just did an update, so it should be the absolute latest version as of today. So to start with, let's talk about Plaster. So Plaster is a PowerShell module that you can use. And I should say, if you've got questions, shout them out, put them in chat. I'll pause and answer them, just so you guys know. So Plaster is a module you can use. Presentation isn't rendering great. Is it just is it not very readable?
That seems okay from my side.
Okay, so Justin needs to get better internet. Okay, well I'll keep going. And if there's something you want me to read out on here, I can. Most of what's going to be on the slides, I'll be reading out in more detail. I mean, that's the point of the slides. It's just to keep me going and on task. So Plaster is a module you can use to templatize and standardize your module layouts. So that is so officially that is described as a template-based file and project generator. So I've got a link to the official repository for Plaster. And I should also say, I forgot this in the beginning, but in this link here, github.com/theposhwolf/sessions, it's got this session in it, including this slide and all the code I'm going to be going over. So if there's a link on screen you see, it'll be in the presentation. Okay, so essentially what Plaster is, in layman's terms, is it allows you to define the layout of your module in a template form, and then you run a commandlet to take that template and then dump it into a folder. I'll show you what that looks like. But just really quick, the benefits of using something like this, it could be pretty obvious. things like standardization. It's like a pipe dream for most people, but it's really something that's good to strive for, though I know that we've all been in the boat where it's really difficult to standardize things because of large teams or people wanting different things. But it makes it really easy if you want to share your code, especially if you've got a bunch of different modules and they all look the same. It can save you time when you're developing it because you don't have to put different things in different places because you just go from one module to the next. And they're all laid out the same, essentially. And you can do this using Plaster. So the way it works, before we get to the way it works, the layout that I use, and this is just an example layout. Obviously, different people do it different ways. And I don't have actually any transitions set up in my presentation. I'm not quite as cool as Justin when it comes to PowerPoint stuff. Is it showing up better for you? Is it showing up for you better, Josh? Oh, yeah. Hey, Greg, thank you for posting a link to it. If you guys want to just pull it up locally and read through it, that's a great idea too. So anyway, the layout that I use for my modules is I've got the root of a module name. I actually get my mouse out and kind of walk through this here. And then I have a bunch of subfolders under it. So I've got a build folder, so that's where my built module goes into using InvokeBuild. So I'll explain that if you're not familiar with it. And then I've got my docs folder. So this is where I store all of my PlatEPS documentation, and we'll get into that after Plaster. And then I have my source folder, which is where all the code goes. And in the source folder, I'll have my classes folder for all my PowerShell classes, if there are any. Not all my modules have them. I have a private folder for all of my private functions, a public folder for all of my public functions. And if you're not familiar with the difference between private and public functions, so public functions are all the functions that you want someone who's consuming your module to be able to see, and private ones are functions that you just want to be used inside of your module. And this isn't, I'm not going into the specifics on module building, so that's really as far as we're going to go on that. But then I also have a couple of standardized scripts I have in all my modules. I've got an onload.ps1. This is code that I append to the end of my PSM1 file using InvokeBuild, and I'll walk through that when we get there. I have a using.ps1. This is where I put code that goes at the beginning of my PSM1 using my build script, and we'll get to the build script. And then the module manifest, of course. And then I also have the tests folder down here at the bottom. And this is where I have all my Pester tests, but I felt like Pester was something that's really difficult to cover in a short amount of time. So it's out of scope for this demo. There's a lot of other resources about Pester. So if you got questions about Pester, go pester someone who has blogged about it. Okay, so the way it works, and I'm going to explain this briefly and then actually show how it works. So you start by planning your layout or borrowing one. I highly recommend borrowing one. That's how I got started. You'll notice in the Plaster manifest that I'm going to actually show, it has extremely similar wordings to a blog post done by Mike F. Robbins, and I'll have a link to that one instead of just using his stuff. I'll actually show it to you. And so you want to plan your layout, define it in the Plaster manifest in an XML format. And XML format always makes me a little sad because it's not as easy to work with as some formats, but it's workable, and I'll walk you through how to do that. And then you want to create any standardized scripts and reference them in your manifests. So like I said, I've got the using.ps1 and the onload.ps1. Store it with the template. I'll show you how that works. And then, store them with your XML template, and then you'll deploy them with Invoke Plaster. So let's actually do a demo now, because slides get really boring, as some people were commenting about earlier. Oh, let's change this color too. All right, so with Plaster, we are going to start with a new Plaster manifest. So let me make sure I'm in the right location, clear out my prompt function. Okay, so if you want a great blog post on starting with Plaster templates, Mike F. Robbins is the one that I started with. It's got a link here in the code. But to create a basic manifest, there's the new Plaster manifest commandlet, and it takes all of the metadata about the manifest. So the path where you want to store it. So in this case, I'm putting it in a subfolder of where I'm at called template, and calling it plastermanifest.xml. Really creative there. And the template name, script module template, really simple. And the template type, so if you're developing a module, it's going to be a project template type. It does have template types of items. I'm not familiar with how that works, but modules are projects, so we're gonna we're gonna stick with that. And then the author, myself in this case, and then you give it a description, and you can tag it if you want to make it so you can filter manifests. In this case, I'm using the same tags that Mike did in his post. So if we create a manifest, we get some lovely XML in the form of a very basic Plaster manifest. So in this case, it only has the metadata filled out. So this should look really familiar because this is all the stuff that we just passed to it. So if we were to actually use invoke Plaster, so invoke Plaster is the command that you can use to apply that template. So if we apply it to our test module directory, we get this nice output. You know, I'm going to go ahead and zoom in a little bit. And we can look in VS Code in our test module directory and see that there's nothing in it because we didn't define anything in that Plaster manifest yet. So I'm going to clean that up. So if we want to add stuff to it, it's got two blocks. One is for parameters, and one is for content. So parameters is where we want to add, well, I guess parameters is the best way to phrase it. It's essentially the stuff that the invoke Plaster command is going to ask about. So I've actually got here inside of this hidden in this string a template that my main script template that I use. I just got all the parameters here that I want to walk through. So for instance, if you're developing a module, you're going to want to know what the module name is. So this is the XML syntax. We've got a parameter tag, and then inside of it we've got three different properties. So in this case we want to ask for the name of the parameter, in this case module name, the type, in this case it's text, not string, it's text, a little different than I would have expected. And then when you run invoke Plaster, it's going to prompt you to fill in that parameter, and this is in the prompt value property of the parameter tag is going to be the verbiage that it's going to prompt you with. And I'll show you how that works as soon as we get these filled out. And then in this case, I'm also going to ask for description, which is text, and this is going to be the description of the module. And I've got some other verbiage in here, and a lot of this, like I said, just came from Mike's blog post. And then the version of the module is again typed as text, and you can use the default property to autofill the parameter if you want, so that way you don't have to type something in. You can just hit enter and it'll autofill 0 to 0.1. That's my default base version number. Some people prefer 1, 0 to 0, whatever works for you. So, and again, the prompt. Now, and another cool one, if you're going to, for instance, you want to get the author, the module author, you can use a type of user-full name, and that will actually automatically fill in your full name as essentially the default value. But you want to store it as text, so this tells it how to store that value. That's what this line 35 is. And the prompt module author's name. And then company name, so text, prompt name of your company, default. And then PowerShell version, so I'm targeting 6.0 or above, so default is 6. And so that's how the parameters work. And so now, if we add parameters without any content, we will actually be prompted for all these values. So now if we look down here at the terminal, so it's going to, remember we have the name of the module, so we can fill this out. I'm going to try not to talk and type at the same time. And then here for the version, we've got a default value. That's what shows up there in parentheses. And the same with the author name. So that's using that user-full name type. And we've got default company and default PowerShell version. And since we didn't have anything in the content block, it just created a folder without anything in it. We're going to delete that folder, and let's add some content to it. And I'm not going too into depth because remember, this is I wanted this demo to be more of an overview of how these all work together. Don't have a ton of time to go into depth. But if you guys do have questions while I'm doing this, shout them out, type them out, let me know. Oh, whoops! I actually copied that line instead of running it. Okay. So the content block, this is how everything gets created. So if you remember from the slide, I had my folder structure. Well, the content block is where you would actually make it happen. So it reads this serially, so in order. So this message here, this will show up first, creating folder structure. You want to make it something that's going to let the user know what's happening. And to create a folder, you specify a source of just an empty string, and the destination of the folder name. And you notice I don't have to specify any paths. The Plaster inside the module will define the root path and then add that build as a folder in that path. And same thing with docs, and same thing with source. And then, and then putting subfolders in there, it's just a matter of specifying the parent folder / subfolder. And you do want to make sure and define the parent folder first before subfolders. And then I got my private and my public, and then my tests folder, and then I've got the common files that I want to deploy to it. So I've got my message for deploying common files, and this notation right here, this is how you reference one of the parameters that you pass. So remember we had a module name, so we can scroll up and look at it. So we've got a module name parameter here on line 16 that we defined. So to create a file that uses that module name parameter, we use this prefix on here, plaster _ param _ and then the name of the parameter, and then enclose that inside of dollar curly brackets. And so what this will do is it'll create a module name .build.ps1, and it's going to pull that file from a module.build.ps1. So this is my build script that I've already defined that I'll have to copy into the folder that has this template file. And then I'm going to do the same thing with my psdeploy file. So I'm going to have the module name .psdeploy.ps1. And then my onload and my using files, those are I'm not going to rename them or anything. So I'm just specifying the destination of source / onload and source / using.ps1. And then for the module manifest, this is something really cool that Plaster does, is it just has a new module manifest tag that you can use to define all the requirements, all the parameters for the new manifest commandlet. Or is it new module manifest? Oh, crap. I forget. Yeah, new module manifest commandlet. Oh, I guess it would probably could use that as a prompt there. But these parameters should all look very, very familiar if you've used the new module manifest commandlet before, because these are all parameters for that. And you notice here I'm referencing all of my parameters here. I got my module name, I got my version. These are all ones that I requested in the parameters. Module name again, so referencing the root module, the author, the company name, the description, PowerShell version, and then for whatever reason, I decided that I always wanted to use UTF-8-NOBOM, so that is the encoding that I have decided to hard code into this Plaster manifest instead of asking if someone wants to do something different. I don't remember why I decided to do that. That's just what I did. Could have added that as a default option, but anyway. So the template that I'm actually using, I've got in a repository in my Plaster templates. If you want to see the full template, that's where it's at. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the script files out of that template into the template that we're building here. And actually, I can even just show you here. So inside this template folder, here on the left, I've got my Plaster manifest that we were just looking at. And I've got my using, my onload, my psdeploy, and my build files. So now, if we go back to my Plaster demo.ps1, and we use invoke Plaster on that template path. And you notice we're just specifying the folder that has the Plaster manifest.xml inside of it. We don't have to specify a path to that XML file. And the destination path I'm using is to a repository that I have open in another window. Here it is. That, oops, I didn't finish cleaning up. Okay, so we're going to, here, I'll delete those out so you can actually believe me when I show you. So here is the empty repository that we are going to be copying or creating a new module with. So invoke Plaster to that demo repo. And here we go. Let me clean up the screen a little bit. So I'm going to give it a name, test module, and then give it a description. Brief description specifically. And I'm going to stick with the default version of 0 to 0.1, default author name, which is me, default company name, which is my business, default minimum PowerShell version. And so here is where you can see this is the message that we specified inside of that content block, and then for each of those items it created, it outputs this create verbiage and then deploying comment files, and then you can see it actually resolved the Plaster parameters there. So it got the module name, and then it created the manifest as well. So if we flip back over to my demo repo here, you can see that we now have our test module build, we've got test module ps deploy, and inside of our source folder we've got our onload, our test module.psd1, so the module manifest, and we can even see that it was generated today, not tomorrow, unless you were in New Zealand, and then my using as well. And so the license and the README, these were already here. Those are just default when you create a new GitHub repository. That is how Plaster works. And if you want to check out some more docs in Plaster that I've used, so I've got the Plaster repo and the docs, a direct link for them here. Rob Flo did a summit presentation at the PowerShell Summit. I think it was 2018. I don't remember. But I've got a link to that here. And that blog post from Micah Problems that I've used, I got that here. And then I've also read through Kevin Marquette's. So if you guys want to check out some more information on that, that's how you can do it. Does anyone have any questions on Plaster before we move on to, what is the next one? Cool. Yeah, I know I'm going pretty fast, but it's because I want to cover all 4 of them in the space of a single presentation time. Oh, somebody's typing a message. Oh, yeah, great. Yeah, I love Plaster too. I always use it after I heard about it. I've used it. Yeah. Agreed. Okay, so PlatyPS. So PlatyPS is a module that allows you to do all of your documentation in Markdown separately from your code. That's actually essentially what I just said. If you're not familiar with what Markdown is, I'm guessing that most people listening probably are, but if you don't know, I've got a good link to it here. It's just a way that you can write or what is a good way to phrase it? You can write text that can be converted into something that looks nice. And so PlatyPS will actually will allow you to edit help files for your commandlets in Markdown, and then convert that Markdown to the PowerShell's external XML help format, which is a pain to edit manually. So one of the biggest advantages of using PlatyPS is that you can edit your docs separately from your code. And this is really important if you have a source-controlled repository, because now you can see on the different folders, like if you're using GitHub, for instance, each folder will have the latest commit to it. Anytime there's a commit that's just docs related, it won't show up in your code on your code folder as being updated, which is really great. So are you referencing the external help format? So that I'm not sure if that, I'm assuming that just supports XML. Or are we talking Plaster here? Cool. Yeah, Plaster is it only supports, as far as I know, only supports that XML format for the Plaster manifest. Oh, cool. I guess that could imagine it to be too difficult to do a conversion between JSON and even YAML into XML. Yeah, that's a good point, Justin. Okay. Another advantage of using PlatyPS, besides being able to edit docs separately from the code, is that you can edit your docs in Markdown instead of inline. I mean, truth be told, it's not that big of a difference between the two. I think Markdown is a little more standardized than the inline PowerShell comment or PowerShell help syntax, but I just still thought I'd throw that in there. So the way it works is after you've added some commandlets to your module, you build it, you import it, and then to create the Markdown files, you can use the new Markdown help commandlet specifying your module. So I've got the syntax here, on the screen. So dash module, and you give it your module name, and you specify an output folder. And if you're using a similar layout that I do in my modules, you've got a docs folder, and then you can edit the resulting files, specifically the resulting Markdown files, in your favorite editor, which should be VS Code. So let's actually take a look at that. Okay, so make sure I'm in the right one here. Okay. Oh, crap. I got to release back. So what it is, I branched all the different steps here. So we're looking at PlatyPS. Okay, so now I've got my repository that I've set up with Plaster, and I can, I've got a build script to take care of this, and I'll explain this in the next module that we talk about. But I have, in my module, I have two commandlets, and these are just random commandlets that I pulled from an old module of mine. I've got one here called format bytes. It's really simple. It takes a number and it formats it in bytes, exactly like it sounds like. But for the sake of this demo, this one does not have inline help. So you notice line 1 is exactly where this one starts. And I've got another one called get installed software, and this commandlet has inline help. So you notice here it's got all the inline help, and then just takes a single parameter called name. And this is important because PlatyPS will actually parse that inline help. Well, that's actually not correct. It will actually, it won't parse it because you can actually look at the help object for a commandlet, but that's getting into the weeds about how it works. So let's get back to the demo. So I've got my module called test module, so I'm going to import it. And using the build script, I put both of my commandlets in there, so I'm doing a git command on my module, and I'll explain how the build works in the next demo. And so if I look at the help for get installed software, you notice here we can see the help from the inline help. That's what this is. If we looked at the help for Markdown, for format bytes, whoops, let me Control C here. There we go. And you notice here that it's just the bare minimum, which is nothing, essentially, for that help. Just basic syntax stuff. That's it. So to create the Markdown docs, we're going to run the new Markdown help, like I had in the slide. And I'm specifying the name of the module, which I already have imported, and the output folder of my docs folder. So we'll run F8. You notice we get this, we get two Markdown files here. So I pull them up, go to my docs folder, look at format bytes, and here is the format that PlatyPS uses for Markdown. So at the top here, you've got some metadata that PlatyPS can parse, and then the rest of this is all Markdown. So we've got the title of the commandlet, we've got the synopsis, and to actually add information in here, we would replace this fill in the synopsis with the synopsis. But I'm going to leave it in here because I want to show you where it shows up in the help for the commandlet. And then also It also is able to figure out the syntax based on the help for the commandlet. And then it's got the description, and it gives you space to add examples, and even grabs all of the parameters and some information about each parameter. So you've got some YAML here about about what the parameter is for, and if you've got multiple parameter sets, it'll tell you which ones it's good for, that sort of thing. And then there's some other information about inputs, outputs. If you want to put information in there, you can. And the cool thing about using PlatyPS is if you're coming from using inline help, then it will actually pull that inline help into the Markdown, so you don't have to worry about copying and pasting data over. It'll do that automatically for you, which is really sweet. Also, you notice that it grabbed the synopsis from my get installed software. It grabbed my description. It grabbed the example, both examples. Well, it looks like it made an error here about the code. That should be, so not perfect, but that should look like that. And yeah, and then there's parameter. So you notice I don't have a parameter description in the inline help. That's okay. But it grabs like the default value for the parameter, the aliases for the parameter, which is really cool. And so what we can do with those Markdown files is, once we've edited them and added all the information we need on them, it's just a matter of using the new external help commandlet, and you point it at your docs directory, and you give it an output path. So in this case, I'm using an output path of my build folder. I've got an NUS folder. So depending on your region and language, that'll probably be different. But if you're in the United States and you speak English, that's what it's going to look like. So if we do this new external help, this is where we get that external XML help file. So we can actually look at this and see that this is not something that I would want to be stuck editing by hand. But that's what it looks like. And so with that, I'm going to remove the module, and I'm going to re-import it. I assume you can see down there. So import module in my build folder / test module. And now, if we look at the help for format bytes, you notice we've got the information that came out of that Markdown file. So we've got the fill in synopsis, fill in the description, and obviously I'm lazy and didn't fill those in yet. But that is how you could use PlatyPS to manage all your docs. And so if you've got a lot of commandlets, your docs folder can be very big, but it still makes it a lot easier to edit the help instead of doing it inline, at least in my opinion. Nice, talk to me this a little quicker. Okay, so that was a quick demo of PlatyPS. I got some links here. So there's a link to the PlatyPS repository, and then I'm not sure how to pronounce this. I think it's Sergey or Sergey, one of the developers on PlatyPS. He did a summer presentation. There's a link to the video there, and then he's also got a good blog post on it that I've got linked here, and then I've got another one from Matt Johnson that I've used in the past. Any questions PlatyPS related before we jump into InvokeBuild?
So effectively created Markdown files for everything that's been exported or that's publicly visible. So it didn't do anything for your privates.
Yes, that's correct. It would not do anything for a private function, and we can even test that if you wanted to.
So, but when you ran the new help thing, it was to the module that's already been loaded. It had been loaded. It doesn't just go inside some folder. You'd have to import that module, and then it builds it on the fly.
Yeah. So what it actually does is it will look at each of the commands in there, and then inside of that command object is a lot of metadata about that command that PlatyPS uses, as well as if you do a git help, there's a lot of data in that help object that's returned. That's what PlatyPS uses to actually generate those Markdown folders or files. Sorry. So here, if we do, I'm just going to rebuild it. I'm adding those private functions to it, or that single private function. Git command. If we look at the commands, we can still only see those. And so if I want to use, let me just pull it out of here, new markdown help, and you notice that I didn't use a force to overwrite, but it only tried to create those two files. So yeah, it doesn't care about the private functions.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Oh, hey, Docusource.PowerShell to make static help websites from your Plot APS. That's pretty sweet. I'd never heard of that. Maybe Justin should do the next month's presentation on that. That would be sweet. Okay, so, oh crap. We are way behind. All right, here we go. Now we're not behind. Okay. Any other questions Plot APS related before we jump into InvokeBuild? Cool. All right. Cool. Yeah, that'd be great. Sorry, responding to a comment there, or a chat. Okay, so InvokeBuild is what you can use to automate the building of your module. So taking all of your functions and putting them into a .psm1. So what it is, officially, and this was taken straight from the repository, a build and test automation tool which invokes tasks. And there's more to it, but that was just a little snippet that I felt like succinctly explained InvokeBuild. And so I've got a link to the InvokeBuild repository. There is a lot of good documentation in that repository. So that is the best place to start for InvokeBuild. Nice. Yeah, InvokeBuild is great. So essentially, InvokeBuild is a tool in which you can define tasks that you want to run to build your module, and then define some dependencies and a hierarchy, and then it manages those for you. And the advantage is using InvokeBuild, and standardization is really a theme tonight, I feel like. But it's one of those things that's like a pipe dream for a lot of people, including myself. But it's something to strive for. But InvokeBuild can do things like define your location for you. You don't have to worry about managing where you are in the file tree, as well as task dependencies. But really, instead of throwing a whole list of things out here, because this is best demonstrated, there's a in the InvokeBuild repository, the concepts page has a lot of information about why you'd want to use a build script why would you want to use a framework like InvokeBuild to do your build scripts versus writing just straight PowerShell. And I'll explain why after we talk about how it works. I forget how many slides I set up for these things. So InvokeBuild works by defining tasks in your build file. So in this case, module name.build.ps1. So if we're talking about the test module we're working with, it's going to be test module.build.ps1. And it uses the InvokeBuild's domain-specific language, so DSL. If you haven't heard of DSL before, it sounds complicated, but it's actually really simple. And I'll demonstrate it here in just a minute. But you define those tasks, and you call a specific task using InvokeBuild-task and specifying the name of the task. And this is the simplest usage of InvokeBuild. And so when you call the publish task, InvokeBuild will, before running that task, run all of the dependent tasks of the dependent tasks first, and then get up to publish. So, for instance, before you publish your module, you probably want to build the module, build your docs, run any tests, and then publish it. And so InvokeBuild will intelligently know, because you set it up, that those all need to be run ahead of time. So, can't hit my arrow key. Okay, there we go. Oh, and now okay. So, the way that works is we are going to jump back into here. I'm going to roll these back. We are going to switch to my InvokeBuild branch. Okay, cool. So, Oh, I didn't even sync it. Okay. So I have my build script here. And one of the things I am a big advocate for is don't start from scratch when you start a build script. Use someone else's. That's how I got started. I unfortunately don't remember whose build script I first copy and pasted and then edited. But if you want one, you're welcome to use mine. I'm not saying it's perfect. It does everything that I want it to at this point. Well, except versioning, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But so in this build script, I meant to have all these minimized ahead of time, and I did not. So I have all of my tasks. So I have a clean task. I skipped all my variables. So I define all these variables at the top so I can reference variables instead of having to write these out every time. So my source path, which is always going to be the script/source, and then my build path, my docs path, my test path. And since I'm using Plaster, I don't want to since the way I'm using Plaster, I'm not doing any file replacements inside of my file. So what this resolves to, so my invocation.mycommand.name will resolve to the name of this file, and I'm splitting on the period. So this will resolve to test module, so the name of the module. So I can do that in a standard build script. So this build script is the exact same build script that I can use on all of my modules, unless I have to do something special for a specific module. And then the output path, or my module path, which is where it's going to be built to, and then the version. So I haven't set up automatic versioning. It's just not something I've done yet. So every time I want to publish a new version, I hard code that. It's not something I should be doing. It's not best practice, but that's what I do. Okay. And then, so the tasks that I have, so I have a clean task. And if you're doing development and you have different versions of your module imported, you want to make sure, so in my task here, if you've got them imported, line 11, you actually remove them. And I'm also cleaning out the my build folder as well. So I'm completely clearing that folder out. So when I build a new version, I know for sure that it's a new version and not just a zombie version or something. And then my task, my doc build task. So, I also forgot to mention, so this is what the domain-specific language looks like for InvokeBuild. Specify a task, give it a name, and then you use curly brackets to define the code in there. Like that's how simple this is. Task and small script for debugging. Quite simpler. I'm not sure I understand what you're saying there. Oh, yeah, that's something you can do too. Yeah, because then you can debug a single file instead of one big file with a bunch of tasks in it. No, that's definitely another way to do it. So I'm going to continue on explaining this way, though. So after my clean task, I've got a doc build task. And inside this doc build task, this should look familiar from the last demo, talking about platyps. So this will rebuild the docs. So if I've edited the docs, it will update them. And if I've just added them, it will create it, that sort of thing. And my module build task, so this is where I'm getting into some dependencies. To define dependencies, you define a task, give it a name, so in this case, module build, and then any dependencies that you want to run before module build, come right after this. So in this case, before I run module build, I want it to clean and I want it to build the docs. Which actually doesn't make sense, because what if I'm building the module, I'm adding new commandlets to it? And when you get up in front of everybody and you explain how you do things, man, sometimes you start to question yourself. So maybe having the doc build before the module build is not the best idea, but that's how I currently do it. Okay, so inside of my module build, this is where all of my magic happens. All of the magic for building the module happens. So the first step that I do in my module build is I get all of my PS1 files that are in my source folder. So remember, let's see, source folder. So this is where I'm going to have all my classes, my private functions, and my public functions. So I'm getting all of them inside of my module script files. So creating an object array here. And then I'm gonna test and see if the build/module name folder exists, and if it doesn't, create it. So again, that build folder is up here, and you notice right now it does exist, but it doesn't have anything in it. This is how VS Code shows empty folders. And then what I'm going to do is I'm adding my using.ps1 file to the top of my PSM1, and I did this. I started doing this, having a file specifically for stuff that has to go to the top of my PSM1, because if you are developing a module that depends on classes in another module, you have to have using module and then module name at the top of your PSM1 file. That is how you have to do it. And so I have a using.ps1 file in all of my modules now. And I added a comment here that says code in this file will be added at the beginning of the PSM1 file. So for example, any using statements here. And that was Justin, you're right. And that was a hard fought, that took me a while to figure out how to do that. So it's now in all my modules, so I never forget. And then, so after I add anything that's in the using file to the top of my PSM1, I add all of my, so line 42, all of my module script files that aren't onload and aren't using.ps1, I add all those files in there. And you notice I'm adding them in by doing a get content and then outputting it to that PSM1, specifically appending it and using UTF-8 encoding. Oh. I'll have to check out that issue, Justin. Let's see. So is the using name convention you're doing or something the broader community does? I typically use imports.ps1. I'm not familiar with using is new in 5.1. Yes, I do know it's something that's newer. I'm not familiar with imports.ps1. Is that? Because I know in the manifest it has an option for one of the, let's see, types or scripts to process. Yeah, I'm not familiar with imports.ps1 is.
I think that's about just the fact that it will throw that type of error if it's not known or that kind of stuff. It'll just do some stuff for you. So you can still just use import module blah 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 at the end instead of at the beginning. So just import this module that you know what it is instead of a requirement, kind of like using this.
Oh, so import module doesn't actually import the classes, and so that's where so for instance, if you have a module that specifies a custom class, and then you want to have another module that takes a parameter that is of that type, that is where you have to use using at the top of the PSM1. You can't use import module because import module won't expose those classes for you to use. You can still create those objects by using the functions in that module that uses those classes, but you can't create, you can't just straight create an object of those class or object of those classes, an object of the type that are defined in those classes. If that makes sense.
Good to know.
And so it's kind of a niche use case, but you know I yeah, it's kind of a niche use case, but it's something that I've come up against a couple of times and spent enough time dealing with it that I just put it into my Plaster manifest, so I don't ever forget. So that's what that's there for. But yeah, Justin's right. The PS class scopes currently are dumb and unintuitive. Okay, so and then my onload.ps1. So this isn't anything that's standard. So like Jake was mentioning, is this something the broader community does? I don't know how other people solve this problem, but if you've got code that needs to run every time a module is imported, The way I do it is by defining this onload.ps1, putting any code in there that needs to happen, like if you have to define some variables to start every time or that sort of thing. That is where I put that in my modules. And yeah, there is the scripts to process and the other methods inside of the manifest, but this is the way that I like to do it. And it may not be the best way to do it, but it's the way that I found works for me. All right, and the next step in my build, after dealing with all of the script files, is I copy the manifest. And the manifest, yes, I have actually watched that video on classes. What is it? Dealing with classes with class or something. It's a really good presentation. If you guys want to. Uh-oh. Alias. Oh, yeah. Gosh darn it. You're right. Yeah, thank you, Stephen. Yeah, that is a big no-no. Thank you for pointing that out. I'll have to update that. Gosh darn it. I'm always terrible about that. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so reminder. Oh, format document. Yes, there's a hotkey for that. Here we go. Check it out. I made it. VS Code has a sheet you can print out with all the hotkeys. I made let's see, Shift Alt F. Oh nope. Control Shift P and Control Shift P and then format. Shift Alt F. Yeah, that didn't actually work. Format document doesn't. Well, yeah, the rest are secondary. Format document did not replace. Oh, okay. Well, I'm not going to get into. So apparently you can have it replace aliases. That's great. I'm going to add that to my settings.json because that's amazing. I did not know you could do that. But yeah, hey, Stephen, thank you for pointing out that I got the question mark. I'm really terrible about aliases, and it's something that I need to get better at. Okay, so the next step is that I do is copying the manifest, and then I update it. So I copy it, and currently the manifest. This manifest was defined by my Plaster manifest, and so it's got just the basic information. And so if I ever need to change like the required, sorry, I'm scrolling here, like the required version of PowerShell, I can come in here and edit this manifest, and then it'll get copied and updated. So if we look back at the build, so all I'm doing is I'm updating the, let's see, sorry, that's the path. I'm updating the functions to export, and this is where I did not use an alias. This is where so for all my module script files, remember this is in an object array of all of my files in my source folder. I'm getting only the objects that are in the public folder. So I've got some regex here for getting only objects that are in the public folder. And I added this little bit here, so this just means, so it could be in a subfolder of public as well. And .ps1. Specifically, so I should point this out as well. I'm only resolving the base names of these files, and so what that means is that in the way that I develop modules is that the name of the file here. Whoops. So get installed software. This needs to match exactly the function name that is in this file. So with the way that I'm building that functions to export value in my manifest, those two values have to match, the name of the file and the name of the function. And if they don't match, then it gets screwed up with my build method. So that's how I resolve my functions to export dynamically without having to hard code them all in. Because if you develop a module with 100 functions, you don't have to manually type those all out. Well, I mean, you do to start with, but you don't have to do that in your build every time. And then my module version, and again, like I mentioned, I don't have automatic versioning set up. It's something that I should look into. And then using the update module manifest, so this will update the manifest that gets built. So that's everything that I am doing in my module build task. And I've got a couple of other tasks I want to briefly mention. So if you have pester tests, you can have a test task, which in this case would depend on module build. So it's a little out of scope, so you notice I don't have any tests in this module. Sorry. But you would want to, of course, import the correct version of your module, so line 70, and then invoke pester on the path to your tests. And then if you're going to publish it, I'm using PS deploy to publish, and I'll show you how that works in the next demo. Okay, so let's just run through. Let's see, pester test. Yes. Oh, yeah, Justin, thank you for mentioning that. I forgot. I even totally forgot about that. Yes, InvokeBuild will not fail by default. So what that means is if I run pester and one of the tests fails, it won't stop InvokeBuild by default. You need to, let's see, pass through and throw. Yeah, so you want to do a pass through and then test and see if there's any errors. And this is a terrible example of that because I am not doing that in this bit of code. But thank you, Justin, for mentioning that. Yes, PS class utils is also if you are using classes, you want to generate tests for them. Yeah, thank you. Oh, I'm not sure how to say your name correctly, Leonhard. Oh, Laurent? All right. Cool. Okay, so let's run through how to actually use that and where it's actually useful. So we've already looked at the build, mybuild.ps1. So if we want to run, what is going on here? Okay, so if we want to run, for instance, if we want to build my module, so you notice I don't have anything in my build folder right now. So I run InvokeBuild specifying the task of module build, and that's just the name that I've decided to give to that task. We get this nice output down below. Let me actually expand this up so you can read it. So you notice we passed the name of module build as the task we want to run. And so it resolves the path to the module, and you notice that we didn't have to tell it where our build file, our build script was, because it'll look for any file in the current working directory that ends in .build.ps1. So you notice that this is the only file that ends in .build.ps1. Specifically, to run module build, it will find all the dependencies to run before that. So we can actually look at module build here. So I'm looking back at my build script up here, and I've remembered to find the dependencies clean and doc build. So you notice it runs clean, and then it runs doc build, and we get this output here showing that it created the XML file, and then it did my module build option, and it ran through all of those and completed successfully. As soon as we get this nice green build succeeded. And if we look in our build folder, you can now see that we've got our test module.psm1 and our test module.psd1, so our manifest as well as the help. And if we import the module, we can see that it does work. And I've already done this when we were going through the PlatyPS demo. And so if you're developing and you want to add a mod or add a commandlet, so line 14, I'm just going to grab another commandlet from my utilities repository. So let's take a look here. So now I have another commandlet, get active sessions, and it's got some inline help. All right, so I've added that new commandlet, and if I want to run InvokeBuild again, you will notice that we can now import the module, and we get the new command. But one thing to notice, and I just realized I forgot to mention this when we were talking through PlatyPS, was if I look at the help for get active sessions, it by default, there's inline help for that. So let's actually look at the directory here. So if we look in the docs, I don't have an automated task to update my docs folder. So PlatyPS has an update. I forget what the command is off the top of my head. Let's look it up. And module PlatyPS. Okay, so if you add a commandlet to your module and you now need to update your markdown help, or you add parameters to a module, or sorry, add parameters to a commandlet and need to update the markdown help for it, you've got the update markdown help module, in this case, commandlet, and I believe it takes a path, and if we update that, there we can see that we've now added our get active sessions. So that's just a little extra bit on PlatyPS. Where if you add a commandlet, you can then add a markdown, the markdown help file for that. And I could actually, that is something that'd be great to add to your build process for your doc build as well, because then you can add any new commandlets, update changes, and before you build your documentation. Cool. I think that was, yeah, that's all I've got on InvokeBuild. Any questions InvokeBuild wise before we jump into? Ooh, we're running a little longer on time than I expected. Let's see. Does the help task text have to be at the top of the individual function files? You put it inside the function. Oh, for PlatyPS to pick up on it. You know, I don't know. Let's find out. So I'm going to delete my get active sessions, and I'm going to take my get active sessions, and I'm going to cut this out of here, because yeah, this will work either place, right? And yeah, honestly, I don't think it. Yeah, Josh, that's a great point. I don't think it matters as long as it's valid, because PowerShell can parse it, but you know, I've got the capabilities to test it, so let's test it. Okay, so I just added it to. So this is now inside of the function. So I'm going to invoke the build. I'm going to re-import the module, and then I'm going to say new markdown help module test module output path is, or output folder is .docs. So this, remember, this is now with the help inside of the function, and it didn't want to overwrite format bytes, so we got active sessions. And the answer to your question is yes, it does not matter. It'll get it from either place. But yeah, Josh King is right. It does pull up programmatically rather than parsing the comments itself. So if you look at the get help object for a commandlet, it by default outputs at this nice. What am I looking at? This nice string output, but we can actually look at the object and see that it's actually a mammal command help info in this case, and it's got a lot of parameters. So you can actually dive into the help of commands and look programmatically at the description, the details, and parameters and that sort of thing. So that's how PlatyPS gets that information there. Okay, cool. Any other questions so far? Oh, what is going on there? Oh, I had a prompt. That's fine. Okay, cool. Okay, so I am discard all 6. Okay, so we are going to take a look. So I got some links here. So InvokeBuild has a lot of great documentation in the repository. So that's why I don't have a lot of other posts here. I got one from Josh Duffney that I used to get started. But if you want to find great documentations on InvokeBuild, you can find them at that link. And I did want to also mention another build framework that in PowerShell you can use is Pisake. I don't know enough about Pisake to talk about Pisake versus InvokeBuild. I just use InvokeBuild because I found a module that I liked and understood that used InvokeBuild and started using InvokeBuild. Oh, sweet. So maybe I should go back to Pisake. How long do I believe it took me to learn to build modules as you do today? So I'll have to check that out too. Francisco, I don't have a good answer for that. I think that's a really difficult question to answer, how long it took me to learn to build modules, because I didn't know that building modules was a thing until I went to my first PowerShell Summit 2 years ago. And after that, that's when I was like, holy crap, and was like, oh, how to build modules. And because I sat in a couple of presentations on them, I don't remember which modules, but like PlatyPS, I think. And then I was like, oh, well, if this can be used to build modules, what else can you do? That sort of thing. But after that, that's when I started really getting into it. But really quick, I've got one last module I want to run through, and this one's, yeah, Justin, that's a great point. The most important thing about PowerShell modules is that you can write them all in PowerShell. You don't have to know C#. You can write a script, you can write a PowerShell module, absolutely. So PS deploy is going to be the quickest demo tonight. So I saved it for last. But this is taken straight from Warren's repository, a quick and dirty module to simplify PowerShell-based deployments. So it essentially provides the domain-specific language for deploying modules in different fashions without having to remember all the syntax for publish module, that sort of thing. So the one big advantage of PS deploy, in my opinion, is simplification. You don't have to write code to be able to deploy. You just need to remember the syntax for it. And there's great documentation, so it's very easy. So the way this works is you define a psdeploy.ps1 file, very similar to your build file, but in this case we're going to be using the psdeploy domain-specific language. And then when you want to deploy, you have an invoke psdeploy step inside of your build script. So you have a task that does publish or deploy or something along those lines. And then the dependencies, of course, will be the module build, the tests, that sort of thing. And then it will deploy for you. So let's take a look. This one was a quick one. Okay. Let me switch over to my PS deploy branch. Oh, and for anyone that wants to take a look at this, my demo repo is published. It's in my the Posh Wolf on GitHub. So if you want to run through and take a look at this. But as we pointed out, there are some things that could be improved. So PS deploy. Let's take a look. Okay, so I've got my PS deploy file here. So it's testmodule.psdeploy.ps1. So this is how we deploy to the PowerShell gallery. So we give it a name. So deploy, in this case, I'm giving the name of my module name. And the by, what are these called in DSL? Tag, the by function, we'll call it. PS gallery module. So this will, it looks like it only works with the PS gallery, but this will work for any PS repository that you have set up that takes NuGet packages. So specifically, this will take a couple of options. So from source, so this is where your module is located. So in this case, mine is in build/test module. And then this 2 on line 4, 2 PS gallery, this can be any repository that you have set up. So if you do a get-ps repository, this is where you can see, this is where that name comes from. So if I had an internal NuGet repository set up, like I do for the contract I'm working on, this is where you set up that repository, and then you can say to, and then give it the name of your internal repository, and you can deploy using PS deploy. And then the options, with options, if your repository requires an API key, which the PowerShell gallery does, you will want to specify that here on line 6. And there's a lot of ways to get the API key in here using an environmental variable. If you're using like a build pipeline in Azure DevOps, for instance, you can set an environmental variable, that sort of thing. To get this working locally for the purposes of the demonstration, I put it in a text file. Not the best idea, but it'll be deleted when we're done. Don't worry. And so the way that works is, we also have commandlets in the PS deploy module to actually look at the deployments. So I do a get-ps-deployments and point it at that psdeploy.ps1 file. We can look down here at the bottom. It'll actually pull all the data about all the deployments in that file. So you can have multiple deployments and use tags. I should have actually had this as an example. But if you wanted to, you could say tag. This is where you say tag prod. And then when you call it, you can specify it only runs certain tags. But that's a little out of scope of this demo. Just know that you can do that, and there's information in the documentation on that. And so, invoke build task publish. So inside of my build task, we already kind of touched on this, but I've got my invoke-ps deploy and using -force so that it doesn't prompt me. And so what that'll do is, oh, I got this on here twice. I meant to do module build here. So we're going to build it, make sure it's up to date, and invoke ps deploy -force. So this is the command that my build script runs, and if I run it by itself, it automatically finds the .ps deploy file and then runs the deployment in it. And you notice here that I do not have permission to access the test module package on the PowerShell gallery, meaning someone else probably does. And so if we wanted, if we wanted to actually, use it as part of the, take. I can't type. Okay. If we actually wanted to use it as part of the build script, that's where we have the task publish. And you notice, of course, it resolves all of our dependencies here. It does a module, it does a clean, doc build, test, but there's no tests, and then it tries to do the publish, and it should fail here, since I don't have permission to use the publish to the test module package. And we're just going to sit and wait here while it does that, even though I know it's going to fail. Well, that was actually the last step in there. So that's how PS Deploy works. It's a really simple module. It's one of those. It's actually a really good example of there's nothing too simple that you can't build a module for. But no, it actually gives you a lot of options. There's a lot more than just deploying to the PowerShell gallery or to NuGet repositories. You can also deploy to file locations. And I'm blanking on the rest of them. I've only used file locations and for file deployments and PS Gallery deployments. So, any questions on that before we jump back to the slides? There we go. There's the error. And there we go. Since it actually failed inside of InvokeBuild, we get a little bit of data from InvokeBuild as well. Let's see. Yeah, and then the same error from before. Cool. Yeah, any questions before we jump back to the slides? I see you have forked PS Deploy. Have you made any changes that are significant? Oh, great question. So I have done 2 PRs in PS Deploy. One. So when you deploy a module to a private repository that depends on modules in that private repository, and that private repository requires authentication, I added the ability to pass that credential to the PowerShell Get module using using PS Deploy. So with option, I added the ability to do credential here. And then, so that was the first PR I did. The second PR that I have open right now is a PowerShell core doing a file-based deployment in PowerShell core does not work because a certain method, certain .NET method is not available in .NET Core, so we just had to switch the method. So if you're using PowerShell core or internal NuGet repositories, then those might be useful. Maybe, but I needed them. I have not tried this in PowerShell 7. This is all in PowerShell 6.4.3. That's a great question. I think it really comes down to, let's actually just take a look here. I PS Depends, which builds on PS Deploy by the same dude. Nice. I have not seen PS Depends, but we can. That's definitely something to take a look at. Let's see. I was going to show you. Yes. So, what is the value of PS Deploy dependency versus just running publish module? So let me just show you here. Because PS Deploy, let's make this full screen. Whoops, and turn off Dark Reader. There we go. So PS Deploy, it allows you to do file system deployments. So if you want to publish your module to a specific location on a file share or something, you can do that with PS Deploy. So by file system scripts from source to a location using the same syntax. Let's see. I'm not familiar with the rest of these deployments, but it looks like you can do a chocolatey deployment using PS Deploys. So by chocolatey. And so there's just some additional functionality that you get. But that's a great question, because why use it if it's a really simple process? And maybe if you are doing just publish module, then yeah, it's not really that big a deal. Let's see. Yeah, I'm not familiar with the other deployment types, but it has other options in here as well. Let's see. What is chocolatey? I guess another thing is that if your deployment changes for some reason, you're not editing your build script. I don't know. I don't have a really good answer to that, Jake. So, I hope what I did say was helpful, at least a little bit. But yeah, so I just got the links here for PS Deploys. Sorry, I keep saying PS Deploys. It's PS Deploy. So there's a link to the repository, a link to the official docs, which we were just looking at, and then Warren's blog post on it. And make sure you look at the Take-Two blog post, not the first one, because the first one is no longer applicable because the PS Deploy has changed since then. So I believe that is the last slide that I've got. So yeah, any questions? That's it for what I've got for tonight. So folks want to jump on and start chatting? We can talk builds, we can talk chocolatey, we can talk time zones.
I think that was great. I appreciate the overarching, step from beginning to end. So that's been very beneficial.
Great. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, this is one of the things that I. So when I submitted some sessions for the PowerShell Summit, I kind of sat and thought about the things that I really felt like I wish I had known when I first started developing modules, and that was just how these all connected together. So that's kind of where this came out of. It's, figuring out how they all work together. It's one thing to read somebody's code in their module repository, but it's another thing to actually hear them explain how it works. So, yeah, I appreciate the feedback.
Oh, thanks for that, Anthony. That was really good.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, thanks for the opportunity, David.
Hey, no problem. Anytime.